Welcome to Rulers Royale, a multiplayer Minecraft server with one aim, to create the best village. The twist is this SMP only has 2 weeks. But Bubble, the title only says 1 week. Well, yes, for me it was in fact only 1 week because I decided to make it harder for myself and joined late. In fact, making things harder for myself is going to be a running theme of this video as I decided to settle on a desert island in the middle of nowhere, thousands of blocks away from everyone else, rather than a really nice village close to everyone else that would have been a lot easier. Day 1. I joined the server, but due to some slight confusion with the mod pack, I accidentally joined 5,000 blocks away from the village I was meant to be assigned to. So as quickly as I could, I made my way to the coords I'd been given. On the way, I did happen to make friends with a panda, and I got a couple pieces of gear from shipwrecks and destroyed nether portals, but that was all I had. When I got there, I decided the village wasn't actually that interesting, but I'd found a really cool village on my journey there. So I made the 3,000 block journey back to this really fun desert island little village on a coral reef I'd found. The only disadvantage is because I've chosen this really cool island in the middle of nowhere, I'm unfortunately on a really cool island in the middle of nowhere. Sure, it would mean resources were harder to come by, but I'm sure that wouldn't end up being that much of a problem. Would it? I immediately realised I had no source of food. Now, in order to maximise the very short amount of time I had on this server, I'd have to come up with some tactics. Tactic 1, robbery. Because I'd travelled so far to get to my village, I'd found so many villages along the way, and as they were unclaimed, I thought, why not help myself to a few of their resources? So I looted, raided, and pillaged other villages for all they were worth. This now meant I had an overwhelming supply of wheat, and I'd never need to make a farm or even farm animals ever again on the server. So now, armed with wheat and various other things I found, I made my way back to my village. You may notice these don't look like normal villages. That's because this server uses the Minecraft Comes Alive mod. This upgrades villages, allowing you to talk to villagers, build buildings, and even add taxes. This means that the criteria for winning the entire SMP was based on how amazing your village looked, how many buildings and people in the village you had, what rank you had on the village, and how many hearts you had with your villagers. So as everyone began settling into their individual villages, I had one resolve. I was going to win. As I started introducing myself to all my villagers, I realised one big problem. These villagers were just wandering around freely? I mean, sure, freedom's great and all that, but one of the categories for winning was the amount of hearts you had with villagers. With them wandering around all over the place, I couldn't guarantee I'd talk to all the villagers in a day. When you talk to a villager, you gain hearts with them, but the more you talk to them, the more tired they get of you. So, after a while, you can't talk to that villager anymore, or you're gonna lose hearts with them. So, in order to maximize my time, I ought to be talking to every single villager as much as possible every single day to build up the amount of hearts I had. But with them wandering around, I couldn't guarantee I got to all the villagers in a day. So, there was only one solution. Yeah, I think I need to build like a villager containment unit. Or, oh my god, that sounds bad. I'm gonna build them a place they can't escape. Nope. I'm gonna build them a hotel they can't leave with really tiny rooms. Yeah, sure, that works. So I began to build my villager containment, hotel. Once that was all up and running, I began to grind hearts with my villagers, trying to get them as high as possible. Unfortunately, this did mean my village was actually uglier than it had been originally, which obviously wasn't ideal as one of the categories for winning is to make the most beautiful village. And I was still critically low on resources. Tactic number 2, begging. I used my excellent persuasive skills to convince some denizens of the server to give me their belongings. This actually worked surprisingly well and meant I now had enough resources to go and start mining for other stuff. So I went mining, joined by my very best friend Ash, who I'm sure would never do anything that would sabotage my progress on the—
My iron.
Ash, please can I have that back? That's my first iron.
Oh, I have so much. I literally have over 2
I
stacks
have none! Can I have it back, please?
I'll give you some of mine!
This was a lie. At the time, I wasn't aware that was going to be my only mining trip in my entire time on the server, so I immediately burned all my iron on an anvil to name my panda Fred. Though, to be fair, I still think that was worth it. Day 2. I began setting up some tree farms in my village. I even travelled thousands of blocks just to find a dark oak forest so I could set up a tree farm for it. I also gathered some sheep and a cow. I was going to get 2 cows, but that one cow took 2 hours for me to find. Turns out there are disadvantages in living on a deserted island in the middle of nowhere where the only land masses next to it are other deserts. But nevertheless, I now had several different ways to gather resources. Now you might be wondering at this point, why would I need so many tree farms and why I had decided to settle on a desert island in the middle of nowhere? I mean, that seemed like a dumb idea and the village doesn't even look that cool. Well, it's time to introduce you to the plan. See, when I first saw this village, I immediately was struck with inspiration from the very skies themselves. Or it might have been that I was incredibly sleep deprived at the time, who can say? But the first thing I thought was, how cool would it be if I transformed an entire village? See, most of the people on the server, even if they were builders, they didn't do as much building as me, or they weren't planning large-scale builds. So I thought if I could transform an entire village, it would give me a really good shot at good points for the coolness factor. But what build, you ask? I was going to create an entire shipwrecked boat and put the village on top of it. Ambitious? Yes. Insane given the time limit? Also yes. Did I even spend more than 10 seconds thinking it through? No! And so began the great tree farming of 2022. Armed with only an iron axe and fueled purely by bread, I began to take on this incredible task of gathering enough wood to create an entire ship. Remember how Ash stole all my iron? Yeah, this is when it comes to bite me, because I burned through every single piece of my iron save one, just making axes to chop down trees. I didn't go get more iron because Ash was assuring me that as soon as we were on at the same time, she would give me some of their iron. They were never on at the same time. Day 3. With only 4 days left on the server, I began creating my boat. After I created the base, it was time to start working on the buildings. Now, the way buildings work in this mod is that there are several different buildings from a catalogue you can build. You can add these buildings to your village and they all serve specific function. Now, what buildings you had, coupled with how many hearts you had and how many villages you had, would allow you to rank up. And in order to get the best score, I had to get to the highest rank in my village. So I got to work building some big houses so that the different families could move in and have children, therefore boosting the population. But then I realized I had no resources to build houses. See, I wanted the village on top of my boat to resemble a normal Minecraft village. Luckily, there was a mesa biome really near my village. One benefit of living near the desert, I guess. Unfortunately, remember how I used up all my iron? I had to mine terracotta with wooden pickaxes for hours. I wish I could say I was having a good time, but the entire time I was dying inside. So with my resources now painfully gathered, I began to build my houses. Luckily, because of my expert villager hotel, I was already sailing away with hearts compared to everyone else. But compared to everyone else's villages, mine was extremely subpar. So I started moving my villagers out of their hotel and onto the boat. But I was still only just building houses for my villagers and at a very low rank, whereas compared to everyone else who were having children, getting married, becoming monarchs of their town, I was still really far behind. And my village still had a long way to go if it's what I wanted it to be. Oh god, was this a bad idea? Oh no. Chat, this is gonna take forever. I don't know if I can finish this. Day 4. I started expanding my village, adding in all the buildings that were missing. Unfortunately, my population was still low because my villagers weren't having enough children. But it's okay, I had a plan for that. Remember that one cow I mentioned earlier? Well, if you gift a married villager cake, they go and have a baby with their significant other. I had all the resources I needed to make cake. I had an overwhelming amount of hay. Because I lived on a desert island, I'd been making sugarcane like crazy. And of course I had the cow. I'd also been making a neat little chicken farm for a while. A manual chicken farm because I have no iron. And on the no iron point, one thing you do need to make cake is milk. In order to get milk, you have to have buckets. In order to get buckets, you have to have iron. Tactic 3. Being annoying. Now, Tactic 3 is something I've perfected over my time, and eventually, after very little persuading, I was able to get my iron. I then gave my villagers cake after cake until the village was overwhelmed with baby. Because they were getting in the way, I put them all in a composter, and now that my population was boosted, it was time to start texturing. Day 5. There were only 2 days left, so I quickly got to work texturing the entire boat. And other than my rapidly declining resources, this was going really well. Until my entire computer broke, decided the internet didn't exist, and it took me 3 hours to reconnect to the server. And even when I did reconnect, I was working at about 3 FPS. But nevertheless, I soldiered on to try and get this build finished in time. Hey there, so after this, I actually did have to buy an entirely new computer, so if you're enjoying the video, I'd really appreciate a comment, a like, and even a subscription if you're enjoying it. So even though the boat looked great now, I still had the absolutely mammoth task of destroying the entire previous village. So I crafted myself a butter spoon and got to business. Okay, right, this is gonna take me forever, but luckily for you guys, with the power of editing, it's done! And now I've got to go to sleep because it is 2 a.m. Day 6. With time rapidly running out, it was time to get serious. I went back to Tactic 1, convincing all my friends I was just on a friendly server tour of storage systems, robbing them for everything I could get away with, and gathering as many resources as I could that I'd been unable to get until now. Even with that, I was really limited on resources, rapidly running out of wood and all kinds of supplies. I needed wool for the sails, but unfortunately I had no grass, so I had to keep killing my sheep and breeding them to get more wool. Luckily, I was able to just squeeze by with the resources I had, and things were beginning to look pretty ship-shape. I know that was a terrible joke. I had to make it though. And with the build finally complete and the maximum rank achieved, it was time to get to work getting as many hearts as possible. It was becoming abundantly clear that my PC would not survive to see tomorrow, which meant I only had the 6th day to get as many hearts as possible. So I spent 6 hours talking to villagers. And I hadn't told you this yet, but I had another secret tactic. Tactic 4. Hugging. You see, when you talk to villagers, there are a number of options, and depending on their personality, their mood, and how long you've been talking to them, different things affect it. However, early on in this whole thing, I discovered that the hug was a very effective method, because the more hearts you had with a villager, the more likely a hug was to succeed. And obviously, if a hug succeeded, you would get more hearts, therefore making the hug more likely to succeed, going round and round in a loop. And because I'd put in so much effort earlier on to get all my villagers' hearts up above 100, it was almost impossible for a hug to fail. The only time I would stop talking to villagers is when they refused to talk to me anymore because I'd talked to them too much. So I spent 6 hours invading my villagers' personal space just to get those hearts up. I doubled the amount of hearts I had from 3,000 to 6,000. Then I added some final finishing touches to my village. I added on a couple rooms I forgot to build. I finished some builds that weren't quite yet done. I added some extra texturing and decoration to the overall build. And finally, I named my village. At this point, my computer was really struggling. It was barely staying connected to the server. So, with 1 day left, I took my final tour around my lovely village. I said goodbye to Fred and to my favourite villager, Davina, who had a grand total of 620 hearts by the end of it. And with one last look at the village, I logged off the server for the last time. The last day. As the last day came, I realised I would no longer be able to get onto the server. I got Ash to go to my village to record the footage you're seeing now. And then the Hearts channel opened in the Discord. Everyone began posting how many hearts they had, and it was looking really good for me. No one had got anywhere near the amount of hearts I had, but there was still a whole day left and I couldn't do anything. I didn't want to post the number of hearts I had until much later because I didn't want anyone to have the chance to overtake me. And then Ash posted this. They had 5,000 hearts. While I still had 1,000 more hearts than him, that was still worryingly close to my amount. Still, after all the villager hearts amounts had been posted, I was still in the lead. But the villagers hadn't been judged yet, so everything came down to the final judgment of how cool the village was. The server owner went around judging all the villagers individually, and I patiently waited for the Discord announcement. As I waited, I got more and more worried. Had it been a mistake to settle on a desert island in the middle of nowhere? Had all my tactics paid off? I hadn't even had a chance to see other people's villages. Was my knee really that cool compared to everyone else? Would all the lying, cheating, stealing, and imprisonment pay off? Or was it all for nothing? I mean, how many friendships was I gonna lose over The announcement came. My village had scored 10 out of 10 for coolness, adding an extra 10,000 hearts to my score, which meant I had the most points out of anyone on the server, and I had won Rulers Royale. The only disadvantage is because I've chosen this really cool island in the middle of nowhere, I'm unfortunately on a really cool island in the middle of nowhere.